Hi, I recently had the opportunity to give a try to Shaolia Warring States, which is a brand new game that uses worker placement as a main mechanism, but it has dice for your workers. We have seen that in other games too, but what is also very intriguing in this game and very interesting is the fact that it has so much replayability and added value through the different decks of cards and different game modes, where you can play a more competitive game, a more collaborative game if you're playing with trades, for example, etc. In any case, in Shaolia Warring States, what you're trying to do is you have your palace where you have slots for up to 8 buildings, and what you're trying to do is you try to either win by cultural superiority by achieving 18 points of cultural progress or supremacy, and then either that or try to eliminate your opponent by inflicting, I think, 12 damage points to the opponent's palace to destroy them and win the game. There are various different feelings and ways to play the game depending on which characteristic you want to emphasize more. If you want a more aggressive game, a more laid back and easygoing game, or whatever, depending on the cards you use, the scenarios that the rulebook has in the game. The booklet is quite big, so don't be alarmed because there are many pages, but most of them are scenarios or additional game modes or explanations. So the real rules, it's just a handful of rules. It's a very simple game. I think the nice feeling from it comes mainly from exploiting all the possibilities, the different pathways you can choose, the different buildings you can build and develop your state so that you can achieve victory. It has gorgeous production. It looks very, very nice. It has lots and lots of cards with different settings. For example, it has production buildings that you allocate a die and you gain something. You have, for example, trade cards, or you can have attack and defense cards where you can attack your opponents or defend depending on what you have built on your state, on your palace. Next to your palace, you can have archers, you can have banks, mansions, smelters, blacksmiths, 1 million different possibilities. And of course you won't be able to build all of them during the course of the game, so each game is going to be different. So I think I'm rushing, I'm giving out my opinion right away, but I had a blast playing this game. I like when games combine easy rules but with a lot of depth and a high enjoyable gaming experience, and I think Shaolia is one of those cases. So join me at the table, I'll show you how the game plays, and then we'll come back at the end of this video for a wrap-up and my final opinion on the game with my first impressions together. Let's see how we play Shaolia Warring States. Chaos has erupted on the continent of Shaolia. The lords from each region have risen up to claim the title of the new emperor. There are both small and large-scale wars breaking out all over the continent. Now it is your turn as one of the most talented leaders in Shaolia, with an ultimate goal in mind, obviously to become the new ruler of Shaolia. Shaolia is a fast-paced game filled with lots of tactical decisions and strategy. What you're trying to do in this game is you're trying to fill your territory that you have in front of you, using dozens of unique buildings and character cards with all kinds of possibilities that they unfold your master plan as the game progresses. You can be a wealthy trade city, a culturally flourishing city, a military land power, or something totally new, and it's all up to us what path we decide to choose. So let's see what we find in front of ourselves to familiarize ourselves with the components of the game before we move to the setup and explanation of how a game of Shaolia plays. First of all, we have the territory boards. Each player is going to take one of those boards. This is the opponent sitting across the table from my side. So this is my territory board, which has 8 slots, 4 in the front row and 4 in the back row, as you can see. Also at the back of my territory board you can see my palace. And it is important, this location, because it can take damage, and if it collects a specific amount of damage tokens, then the opponent wins, because I lose the game. And there is also the cultural track at the bottom, goes all the way to 18. If a player manages to progress this all the way to the 18th slot, then they automatically win via cultural superiority in the game. What we find in the game also is level 1 cards, which have this back. And there are various cards that belong to this deck. There are different cards which are essentially to most of the games, because the game plays in different game modes. We're going to explain this down the road in a bit or more detail. Just to give you an impression of some level 1 cards. These are level 1 cards that we will be building throughout the course of the game. They all have this back, and we sort out the deck and put it here face down with some space next to it for discarding cards. Next, we have level 2 cards, 106 cards. Keep in mind that not all of those cards will be played in each game. Game is played in different scenarios where you have different configurations of decks of cards included, so that it gives a different overall feeling of a more competitive, less competitive, whatever, it's up to you, type of game, which are called the scenarios. You'll find a lot of coins, metal coins in the deluxe edition of denominations of 1 and 5, which is a basic resource of the game. We have the officers, which are used to modify the pips of the dice. Dice in this game are workers. It's a worker placement dice game. We have the damage counters that we have seen when we take damage in our buildings or in our palace. We apply those respectively. We have, of course, blockage tokens. If someone blocks the ability of one of our buildings. We have respectively the attack token, which increases our attack value. When we apply this token, it has 2 swords crossing each other. Then we have this life token that we'll explain, +1 life token down the road as well. And most important than all, we have the dice. Game comes with 12 dice that are used in order to activate different buildings and take actions. This small board here, which is the board where we have the trading locations. This is a trading board where we go and do different trading actions on the board. We also include 2 more depending on the game we play, the game mode. This is why you find 2 more open slots in there, and in those, depending on the scenario, we're going to choose 2 more buildings for variability and put them on this slot respectively. Cool. Next, we find the cultural score marker, obviously, the one that tracks the cultural score of each player, and the any dice tokens that are applied on some locations to indicate that instead of a specific requirement for a specific number, you can include the any token and then not be restricted to just number 1 or 2 or whatever. These are the components of the game. We also find some player aids, which are double-sided. All the cards in this game are linen finish, which is great quality. The boards are thick, everything looks gorgeous in my opinion, but you can see for your own eyes. And then we have the locked space cards. We have 8 of those. Each player is going to start with 2 locked space cards on these exact positions, one on the first row on the first slot and the second one on the 4th row of the second row, which show a locked forest space. You need to clear this up when you want to use this slot to include the 7th and 8th building in your character in your territory board, and you need to pay, of course, 3 money to do so. We'll explain it down the road. So these are the components of the game. The game setup is very simple. We decide which game mode we're going to play, and game setup can be slightly different between the game modes depending on which game mode we choose. We're going to come back later on this. The first game that we're going to play, the rulebook suggests that we use the number 1 scenario, which is Warring States, hence the name of the game. Each player takes 1 territory board, like I've done here in front of me. We position the trading post on the side, and we choose the 2 additional kiosks that we're going to include depending on the game mode. We place the level 1 cards here, and we leave space next to it for shuffling and discarding cards when we use them. Usually we use all of the level 1 cards, respectively. Then we use a level 2 card deck. Depending on the game mode, we're going to select specific cards that we're going to include in this deck. We're going to shuffle it, and then we're going to open 3 of them next to each other. It's a bit condensed here due to the video, but you can imagine that this is a closed deck and have 3 cards, one next to each other, so that we have a market and offering of 3 cards, respectively, from level 2. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to place the trading post, as I mentioned, on the empty spots, depending on the scenario. Each player takes their starting resources according to the game mode, which will include some of coins or some additional resources. Again, scenario dictates what we take in each mode. Every player should place their cultural score marker on the 0 spot, as I have done here. And each player places 2 locked space tokens on these slots. Then each player is going to take 3 dice. You're always going to roll 3 dice, plus any additional one that you may have for this round only. And the first player takes the first player marker token, which is this nice wooden flag. very good looking first player token, and keeps it close so that she indicates that they are the first player. The most regal looking player becomes the first player according to the rulebook, so we position the gold, mineral, stones, which are those, the any tokens, the damage counters, the attack tokens, the life, heart tokens, and the blockage tokens, and the officials nearby in piles so that you can easily reach them and use them. Of course, depending on the game mode, we're going to have also some additional characters dealt to each player besides the starting resources, but again, the game scenario will dictate what we start with. So this is the setup and it's very easy, so let's proceed to the gameplay. The object of the game here is to win by achieving total victory with two ways. There are two ways to win in Shaolia. You can either deal 12 damage to the opponent's palace by inflicting direct damage on the palace and then destroy it and win, or you can achieve a cultural score of 18 by moving your cultural token all the way to the 18th slot, and then you win through cultural superiority. You can destroy your opponent's palace by putting the damage tokens here or moving the cultural score on the respective track as you see here. The run has a very simple sequence. The game is played through multiple rounds and each run consists of 3 different phases. Phase number 1 is the purchase phase, where we purchase cards and resources. Phase number 2 is the building phase, where we build the purchased cards on our territory board in the specific slots that we can build on. And phase number 3, we roll the dice that we have and we activate cards that we have already installed on our territory board in order to produce action, resources and abilities for our strategy. So the game starts with the first player purchase phase, then the second player is proceeding after the first player has finished purchasing. The next player purchase phase begins. After each player completes all the players go around the table and proceed with completing the purchase phase. Then we start with the building phase, again from the first player. So purchase phase, purchase phase, purchase phase, then we move to my building phase, which is my second, building phase, and then I'm just describing a 3-player game, and then I move to the action phase, which is first player's action phase, second player action phase, third player action phase, and so on. So let's move to the purchasing phase and describe it because it's the first phase that each round starts with. Players can buy 4 different things in the game. You can buy level 1 cards from here. You can buy level 2 cards from here. You can buy extra dice from here to add to your 3 dice that you're rolling each round. And you can also buy officials which are affecting your result. Essentially, they're modifiers for the pips on your dice. All this is very important, and everything, included purchased cards, is open information for all players. We place the purchased cards on the table next to our territory board before everyone is finishing this phase, and then we proceed to the second phase, which is the building phase. And everything is done per player respectively, with turn order. Players can purchase as many cards as they want if they have the respective resources needed. At the end of each purchase phase, players must discard cards until they meet their hand size limit of 8 level 1 cards and level 2 cards. So you cannot have more than 8 cards in your hand, and that does not include any characters which are out of the 8 hand card limit. So, how do we buy? For level 1 cards, again, level 1 cards are the ones with the blue back, and these are always, most of the times, included in all scenario modes. I'm just going to quickly show you what type of cards are included, and usually you can find different cards, like, for example, school is a level 1 card, infantry is a level 1 card, the farm is a level 1 card, the blacksmith is a level 1 card, the barricade is a level 1 card, and the market is a level 1 card. So you spend 1 gold to get a level 1 card from the card deck here. So for example, I can pay 1 gold and buy one of the level 1 cards. I take it in my hand. I'm not building until it's my turn to go to the building phase and build them. We can buy level 2 cards. The way to pay for the level 2 cards have the deck and the 3 open always from level 2 with a yellow back. You discard 3 cards in total. They can be either level 1 or level 2 card from your hand, and you get a level 2 card from the level 2 drafting pool. So you see, for level 2 cards you pay with cards that you discard, but for level 1 cards you pay with gold. Keep that in mind. Moving to the third thing that we can buy in our turn, and of course we can buy as many things as we want. It's up to us how many resources we want to spend to buy several cards, several dice, different dice and different number of officers. So moving to the extra dice, you pay 4 pieces of gold from these coins, from your personal reserve, to get an extra die. Extra die can only be used once and must be used during the next subsequent action phase. So I cannot buy an extra die and keep it indefinitely, and I cannot buy an extra die and keep it for a future round. If I buy with 4 gold on extra die, I need to use it in the upcoming action phase within this turn, this round I mean. The fourth and last thing that I can buy on my turn is officers. The officers are those nice officer meeples you can see here. Essentially, this is a resource of the game. I pay 1 mineral. These are the mineral tokens. They're produced from some of my buildings. I pay 1 mineral to get 2 officers. So 1 stone of mineral, and I get immediately 2 meeples of officers for me to use later on. So it's not 1-to-1, don't mix it, it's 1 for 2 officers. Okay. What the officers do is they adjust the numbers of any die by 1. So for example, the 5, they can make it 6 or 4. The 6, they can make it either 1, circling around, or 5. So minus plus 1 for each official officer spent. Now let's talk about the level 2 cards drafting pool, which is on top here. I put it on the top, usually it's below, so that it fits the video nicely. You draw a card from level 2 card deck to refill the drafting pool after purchasing. So if I take that card, then I need to refill it immediately with another card so that there are always 3 on display. If you don't like any of the cards in the drafting pool, meaning none of those 3 level 2 cards, what I do is I can pay 1 gold to discard everything and then draw 3 new cards for me to choose from respectively. So this can be done as many times as I spend coins. The resources of Shaolia are very simple. We have the gold denominations of 1 and 5, and this is a basic resource of the game. We have the mineral, resource used for building buildings or trading, and we have the officers, as I have shown you before, which is actually for adjusting the number of any die by 1. If you roll, for example, a 6, as I mentioned before, you can use an officer to make it either 1 or 5. And if you use 2 officers, you can change a rolled 6 to either 2 or 4. Depending on how many I want to spend, I can keep adding or subtracting pips from my die. And this is very nice because it gives me flexibility. Okay, so this is a purchasing phase. I buy as many things as I want, then I want to proceed to the next player who goes through their purchasing phase. And when everyone has had a chance to purchase what they want, we move to the second phase of the game for all of us, which is the building phase. Now, during the building phase, you will build cards that you have previously purchased and you have in your hand during the purchase phase on your territory board. To use a level 1 or level 2 card that it's on a card respectively, you need to first have built it, because if it's not built, you cannot use it because you have it in your hand or next to your board. So most level 2 cards have a building condition written on the upper part of the card. So for example, this is a level 2 card, this is the library. In order to build it, here on the top says school or library. So I need to have either school or library already built in order to build this card, which is further down the diagram. So essentially we'll see that you can either build next to an empty slot or overbuild the prerequisite building as stated. We're going to see it later on. So let's see the different things that we can build. There are 3 different things that you can do in the building phase. You can pay the building cost and place a card on one of the empty spaces on your territory board. Okay, so for example, I can pay any coins listed here. This is a building cost. This card costs 1 gold coin, as you can see, and I can immediately build it on my building territory board. If I want to build more cards, again, I can build more cards by paying additional cost. This also costs one coin, the infantry. I can even build a farm if I have more coins to build. So overall, I can build as many cards as I want, as long as I pay for the resources. You see, all the level 1 building cards that I built already, they have 1 gold coin cost respectively. And of course, my opponent will be building their own cards, so there's not going to be just me building. Everyone on their turn, they're going to be building their own buildings depending on their strategy, creating different possibilities for them to follow. So just put some cards here. So I'm going to be having a different state from my opponent with different strategies to follow. So overall, that's what's important, is at this building phase, I build as many cards as I can pay for. This was the first thing that I can build, buildings from my hand. Keep in mind again the building condition. If it is a level 2 card, it has some prerequisite building that needs to be already on your board. Okay? And you can either build it on the territory board or on the card itself when you build the new card. Now the second thing that you can build on your turn is actually clear locked spaces. An opening of a locked space is one of the things you can also do on top of building different buildings during the building phase when you're the active player. So what you do is you pay 3 coins, as you can see stated on the locked card. You pay 3 coins and then you discard this card and you open a slot for additional buildings for you to install. And you can do this 2 times because you also have a second locked card here, meaning overall you pay 6 gold coins, so that you can open up to the 7th and 8th slot additional. The third thing that you can do on your turn, and this is not either or, you can do all of them, meaning both build buildings, both open locked spaces, and also demolish. So the third thing you can do is demolish. You can remove a constructed card from your territory and place it in the discard pile with no cost, so that you open up a slot for something else. But keep in mind, you can remove as many constructed cards as you want, but you cannot move them to another space if you choose so, because this is not allowed. That's why when you build the cards and the buildings, you need to really think where you want to place them, because they're going to stay there unless you demolish them, which essentially you lose them this way. So let's see how typically the card anatomy looks like with this card. This is a theater from level 2. You can see on the top it has the building conditions, as we mentioned. The theater has the school or another theater as a building condition in order to build it, meaning if you have already a theater, you can build the second one, or if you have a school, you can build again the theater. To build this card, you must have at least one of the buildings that it states there. You can destroy the school and build the theater on the same spot if necessary, or you can build it on another slot if you can spare one additional slot. What you'll need to find is you need to find an empty space in order to locate it. And the next thing that you need to do is you need to see the building cost. The building cost is stated here. This building costs 3 gold coins and 1 mineral. You need to present both of them in order to build it, so keep in mind you need to have all of the resources. The next thing that you'll find on the card is the life it has 3 value life, meaning it can take 3 damage. We'll see later on when opponents attack your cards. And the last thing that you need to see is you need to find, of course, the card that it interests you, because it has here the dice that you're going to use and the ability that it does. It could be a production card or something else. We'll see how the cards work later on. So you'll take the prerequisite, you'll pay the requirements in resources, and you're going to build it as long as you are allowed to do so. Once every player has gone through their building phase, building various buildings, opening locked spaces if they want and have the money to do so, and demolishing any buildings they want to demolish, then we move to the action phase. Again, the action phase is played in turn order: the first player, the second player, and the third or fourth player if you're playing up to 4 players. During each action phase, you will roll 3 dice, right? So we'll get some results here, and you are going to use these dice, which is your result, in order to activate card abilities with what you have already rolled. Keep in mind that you can use officers to change the pips of the die so they better suit your requirements from your buildings. So essentially, for example, the blacksmith here requires a 1, meaning that if I had one officer to spend, I would change this 6 that I rolled to 1, and I would be able to position it here, because here it requires number 1 in order to gain 1 mineral from the bank. So I will take 1 mineral and keep it next to me with my resources. Okay, the same way work most of the buildings. You can either have buildings that require a specific value. This theater requires a 5, and it gains 1 culture, it yields 1 culture for each culture card in your territory. Okay, this deals damage. For this one you gain 3 gold. If I was placing the one I rolled here, or I can do it again with another one, if I have a second officer to change this 5 to 1, or if I have 2 officers to make 5-6 with one officer and 6-1 with another officer, in that case I would be able to activate both of my buildings, and here I would gain 3 gold. The card ability is always described at the bottom of the card and applies immediately when you activate the action with the dice. This is the action command that you find. Okay, so these are some important rules that you need to take under consideration during the action phase. You use the dice in order, meaning you use the die one by one. They apply the effect of one die, and then you can use the next one. For example, you can spend the first die to gain 2 officers from one building, and then use them with your second die to increase its value or decrease its value respectively. The second thing to remember is you have a constraint for multiple activation. Every card can be activated only once, so I cannot activate again the blacksmith or the farm because I have already done once this action phase. This applies even to cards that they have 2 different sections. For example, this catapult has 1 that deals 1 damage or 3 damage on defense cards, or you can put a 3 and a 4 together. You need 2 dice here to deal 1 damage to all cards in the front row. If I do one of those, I cannot in a subsequent die. For example, if I had a 3 here and a 4 here, when it's my last die, I cannot use it here with a 1 to do the second portion of the card. I can do either one or the other, not both. So the rule applies again. I can only activate 1 card, each card once per action phase. Last, we have some basic abilities on the palace itself. You can see here there are 3 slots. You can put any die here to gain 2 gold. It says any here, so I can put my last die, which let's say it was a 2 or whatever, and I don't have a use for it, or I don't want to get something from that. I put it here and again, or it can be 2, 4, 3, it doesn't matter the number, that's why it says any, and I gain 2 gold. For this action slot, I gain 2 gold again, and for this action slot, I gain 2 officers. So the palace is the only place where you can put 2 dice or 3 dice. But for your cards, you cannot use the same card twice in this action phase. So these are the constraints, and these are the abilities of the palace. Of course, depending on what buildings you have, you're going to have a high selection of different choices to get different things, resources, attack value, cultural value. For example, here with a 2, I would be able to gain 1 culture, so I would move my track from 0 to 1, working towards the 18 points that I need in order to win the game with culture. So this is very important to understand what is best for you depending on what you have already built or what you're planning to do. Next, let's speak about the level of the cards. There are different level cards. We have level 1 cards and level 2, as we have seen. You can easily differentiate, besides the back of the card even when they are installed, if they're level 1 or 2, because the level 1 are basic cards. There are 6 kinds of level 1 card and 8 cards of each kind, total 48 cards in total, and they have a pentagon emblem for their level 1 cards. So you can see the farm. Let me show you a farm up close. You see it has a pentagon emblem, but level 2 cards like this catapult or whichever level 2 card have respectively a hexagon. So you can say immediately that this is a level 2 card because it has a hexagon instead of a pentagon. Okay, so that's very easy to understand even when they are installed, so you don't have to take them and see from the back where they belong. That's what I mean. Level 2 cards are advanced cards. There are 28 cards, kinds of level 2 cards, and 4 cards of each kind, giving a total of 106 cards as a sum. Not all of them play. Depending on the scenario you choose, some of them are left behind in order to make the game follow a specific flow, and then it's up to the players how they best use them. The last thing I want to mention are the wonder cards. Wonder cards are special level 2 cards that you can see. Instead of the normal, you can see the hexagon again. Instead of the normal level 2 card, they have also a border running around the border of the card. So you can see these are all these cards are special cards: the Fortress, the Ancestral Valley, and the War Elephant. And you can even easily say that they are wonders because of their respective borders. So wonder cards are kind of level 2 cards, but they have more powerful abilities and a higher building cost usually. So you need to be careful when you need to spend these resources and use them respectively. They are shuffled into the level 2 cards deck, and there are 3 kinds of wonder cards, 2 cards for each kind. Okay. Now, these are all the cards that you have seen. Now, let's see, besides the card level, what else we find on the cards. We have the action command cards. There are 4 kinds of action command cards. We have the ranch, for example. Let me show you where is the ranch. This is an example of a normal command, like the ranch. Normal command, it can be activated by spending 1 die. I put a 2 here and I gain 6 gold. This is an action command card. Another example, it could be the library. The library, again, is an action command because I can spend a die of any value and gain 2 culture. This is again an action command card. Another choice could be the cavalry. The cavalry, for example, or even the catapult I have in front of me, are a special, again, action command. Needs 2 dice in order to make the more effective version of the action, which yields higher damage to, or at least damage to more cards instead of only 1, or you can do the less strong action. But again, this is considered an action command. It just has 2 options for us to choose from. Last but not least, we have the passive ability stated with the letter P. This is stated by P command. You can benefit, you see here the P. You can benefit from the ability without using any die, so you don't need to place any die here. It's always on, even if you don't activate the slot next to it. But if you do activate it, you gain 2 life here and place them anywhere. But this is still on. It doesn't mean it's not applicable because you have used the card for the second portion of it. All of those are action command cards. For the ability activation, keep in mind that you have it always on and you can benefit from the passive ability when another cultural passive ability has been triggered on the territory. For example, the garden, I'm going to find it. No, it's not in front of me. Gives you the ability to gain 1 culture when a culture card is activated on your territory. Oh, the theater is the same like that again. Okay, so let's move to the cards classification. Depending on their abilities, level 1 and level 2 cards in Shaolia can be classified in 6 different classes. We have gold cards, mineral cards, culture cards, attack cards, defense cards, and trade cards. Gold cards are very simple. Like the farm, it has a gold, or the mansion, they have a gold icon within the top left corner, and actually there are cards that produce gold, the basic resource of the game. Can be identified by the gold icon in the upper left corner of the card. Okay, that's cool. Then we have the mineral cards, like the mine. Again, mineral cards are production cards. They have a mineral on the top left section, and mineral cards produce obviously mineral, a resource used for building and trading, and can be identified by the mineral icon here. Next we have the culture cards, like the shrine or the library, that they have the culture score token that we have here. This is a token on the upper left corner. Produces culture score, so that you increase your culture by using these buildings, essentially. And there are two ways to win the game. As I remind you, you can either win by destroying the opponent's palace or acquiring 18 culture points in order to win the game immediately. Okay, so there you have it. Okay, next, this was the third type of card classification. Next is the attack card. The attack card have obviously the attack icon on the top left. This is an attack card. You can identify them by the red background, the catapult, the infantry, the archers, even the war elephant, which is a wonder card, is an attack card. So the attack card has the possibility to deal damage to cards or to the palace of the opponent's territory. So we are attacking the opponent. That's what we do with the attack cards. Can be identified by the sword icon in the upper left corner, and players gain 1 gold as loot every time they destroy an opponent's level 1 card or character card, and 2 golds every time they destroy an opponent's level 2 card. So if I destroy a level 1 card from them completely, I gain 1 gold. If I destroy a level 2 card, I gain 2 gold respectively. I also gain 1 gold when I destroy a character card from the opponent. So the structure of the attack cards is very simple. Let's see the infantry, for example, that you can see here. It has, when you do the attack, you need to target. The attacking player can choose a target from the cards or palace of the opponent territory when I do the attack. Every kind of attack targets 1 object in a single attack. We cannot apply leftover damage to other cards. For example, if I deal 6 damage with a stronger card, I cannot say I destroy this card and then I destroy the second card. I choose 1 target only. Every card, as you have seen, let's see, this was from the opponent, it has some life counters on it. This one has 2 hearts that you can see. That means that it can take 2 damage. If accumulated damage is equal to or greater than the card's life, the card is destroyed and moved to the discard pile, and the attacker obviously gains a gold if it is a level 1 card, 1 gold if it's a level 2 card, 2 gold respectively. The damage counter is placed, so if this card had, on my opponent, this card has 2 hearts for life indicator, it can take 2 damage. If I use this infantry, I deal 1 damage, then I take 1 heart token and I put it here. In another round, or maybe with another card activation, I can inflict the second one and then destroy it completely. Okay? Of course, it makes sense, if possible, to destroy it immediately, especially if you're playing 3-player game or 4-player game, but it could be that you cannot do it with small strength attack value cards like this one. So this is how the attack cards work. Respectively, the defense cards, which have the defense icon of the shield here, the ones with the must be attacked first ability, defense cards, keep other cards from the palace safe from incoming attack when people attack you. So it says P, passive, it must be attacked first. So when this opponent was attacking me and I had, let's say for example, this guy also had a barricade. So I cannot destroy this card or attack it. This was just for illustration, because there is in his front row, he has a barricade, meaning that I have to attack it first. I have to first destroy this defensive building and then try to target with other attacks with different card, either the palace or another card of the opponent. So keep in mind that defense cards must be built always in the front line of my territory or from the opponents, so it cannot be built on the second line, so it needs to be on the first line. And also the barricade is a basic defense card. If the barricade is on the territory, attackers must destroy the barricade first to attack other cards as indicated on the card itself. You can have more than 1 barricade, of course, you can have 2 or 3 if you're playing for a more defensive posture. The last classification that we find, of course, is the trade card, like the one that you see for the market. It has a trade icon on the upper left with a trading SIP. This card is a basic trade card, the market, but there are other additional more advanced trade cards. Using the trading board, which is here, keep in mind here we're going to have 2 more slots, depending on the game we're playing. You can do trades. When it says trade once, I can choose one of the kiosks to make one trade here. So for example, if I was using the sell mineral slot here, it says you can sell mineral a maximum of 3 times for 3 coins each, meaning with this card I can activate the market and decide to make a deal with this trading post where you can sell up to 3 of my minerals for 3 gold each, but I cannot use a second kiosk with a trade once icon. This is going to produce a lot of flexibility because you're going to give you access to tokens and resources that you don't have in order to build other things, or to spend something that you produce a lot in order to gain something back from the trade actions. Last thing I want to mention are the status tokens. We have different status tokens, as you have seen here. The attack token, which is this crossed icon, it increases the attack damage yield on an attack card, from an attack card, and it can only be used one time. So for example, if I have on this infantry this icon, I can increase my attack. When I spend this, when I attack with infantry, I can spend 1 attack token in order to deal 1 damage more. So 1 plus 1, 2. And if there was no barricade here, to immediately destroy the market, which has 2 life points, for example. Another token is the life token that you have here with the plus hard, which means it increases the life of a card, increases a card's life by 1, only for 1-time use. It applies to a damaged card when the life token, if applied to a damaged card. So for example, if I had already 1 damage here, I can spend 1 life token to restore it to its 2 life value. Okay, so that's very important. Another token that you can use, status token, is a blockage token, which has this padlock. If applied, the cards can't use any active or any ability, so I can apply it to my opponent in order to block their ability. To remove a blockage token, players need to spend all 3 rolled dice, so it actually hurts a lot, and they need to spend them in order to remove 1 block status icon from previously placed from an opponent. So it locks the ability of a card. Keep in mind that you cannot block passive ability, so I cannot block a passive ability P. I can only block actions. The last status is an any die token, which says any here. Choose an action command from one of your cards in your territory and apply the any die token. Of course, this gives me flexibility because when I want to use the market here, which says use the number 1, rolled 1 result in order to trade once, I can put any. That means that I can use any number die without using officers to change the pips. So I can use a 1 and 2, a 3 or 5 because it has the any. I can use whatever die I want. If applied, the action command will be changed to any command as I've shown you now, and can be applied and cannot be applied to passive abilities, which doesn't make sense. You want to have the passive ability always on. A maximum of 2 status tokens of the same kind can be placed on a single card or the palace. You can also place status tokens on the palace. Once a token is placed on a card, it cannot be removed until it has been used. So I cannot say, wait a minute, I want to use it here, for example. It stays on the card. And of course, status tokens can be also placed on the palace to increase the life of the palace, or for example, the different status that they are awarded to the palace. Status tokens are very useful and give a lot of flexibility on top of the abilities of your cards. The last thing I want to mention are the character cards. Remember, you take some characters as initial resources depending on the game mode. These are character cards that can be used as a surprising variable factor during the game. They produce cool things. Each player gets a random character card at the beginning of the game as part of the starting resources. The number of the character cards you receive depends on the game mode, of course, and unlike other cards, your character cards should be kept secret from your opponents. This is only for your eyes. If you want to use them, you can open and use one of your character cards at any time during your turn, during any phase. That's important. And if you don't like your character cards, you can discard them all and gain. You can discard them and gain 3 gold for each at any time during your turn. There are 2 different types of effect. We have 2 different cards. We have the ones with the build type effect. It says build this card immediately, and you see it provides an additional action. So here I can put any die to gain 1 mineral, or number 1 to gain 3 gold. This is a very valuable card, and of course when I build it, it will take a slot, so you need to think careful when you use these character cards because they take some portion of your territory board. Of course, there are other cards like the captain here, which says they have an immediate effect. You get the stated effect immediately. For example, if you sell this card, you gain 3 gold immediately just for you to sell it, or gain 2 gold here. Sorry, this was for all the cards. The effect is here: gain 3 life tokens and apply them immediately, or the rich baby, gain 2 gold, opponent loses 3 gold. So you apply the effect and then you discard it. You don't build it like those cards here, and they're very useful for a surprising variable to surprise your opponents. So these are the rules of the game. I was very detailed in order to describe everything, but you can understand that it's boom, 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 very simple game. You go through your different phases. You start with the purchase phase, then you move to the building phase, and then you activate your cards and do different things with them. So the game mode, there are different game modes. You can have either the Warring States mode, which is recommended for beginners to, or if it's your first game, to go through 2 or 3 times in order to understand the game. It's a 2-player scenario, the Warring States. And then you can have also possibility to do a custom game with a specific setup for different cards. I'm just going to show you, this is a Warring State. It shows you the object of the game: destroy your opponent's palace by dealing 12 damage or gain cultural score of 18 to win. Then this is a description of the scenario. It says it's for 2 players. It says it's a standard 1 versus 1 mode, and it also shows that you use all of your level 1 cards, 48 cards, and then from the level 2 you choose specifically those cards for gym, for cavalry, etc., in order to use exactly the cards needed. Also, it shows the trading post tiles that you need to select. For this one, you use these specific 2 trading post tiles, and that you put them on this slot and conclude the trading board itself. You have different scenarios for a trade war, for hidden figures, for blue diamond. This is 1 versus 1, again 2-player. You have a 3-player scenario, the 3-cornered war, a 4-player scenario, which is a 2 versus 2, the alliance, the tyrant, 1 versus 2, that should be interesting too, the rabble, again a 2-player scenario. And there are some deck recommendations. This is a deck card, and these are the Kickstarter exclusive additional cards, and some FAQs for some trading posts or some cards that you want to understand how they play, etc. This is the company that produces the game, Bad Comet. They have a page on Facebook. This is their email contact if you want to contact them, and also they have their website at badcomet.co/Shaolia. Just to finish this video by mentioning that Shaolia is running a Kickstarter now for the reprint of the base game plus an additional expansion with much more gameplay. Not that the basic game doesn't offer a ton of replayability. You can understand that with all these cards and with all the combinations that you use, you have a ton of things to do. But keep in mind that there's some cool things in the now new expansion that's running on Kickstarter. So if you like this video, please support them with the link that I'm going to include in the description of this video for the Kickstarter campaign. So there you have it. This is Shaolia Warring States. Wow. Very fun, very enjoyable experience. I had a blast playing Shaolia Warring States, and I'm really looking forward to try the different decks of cards, different scenarios, to try different combinations and pathways to victory. What I really enjoyed about this game, first of all, is the worker placement. I really like the mechanism a lot, but also the fact that depending on how you build your state, which cards and which buildings you choose to install, to build on your 8-slot grid, which is your state actually on this board. So which cards you decide to build there, you're going to get a completely different pathway to achieve victory. You have to be prepared on what your opponents are dealing, what you're trying to do. If they are aggressive with more attacking cards, you need to be prepared to install more defensive cards, or the other way around. You need to be able to adjust your strategy on the go, on the fly, depending on if you see some movements from your opponents. But what is really, really nice is the fact that all these combinations can have a blast in enjoying the game, since if you decide to combine 2 or 3 cards to give good combos to you, and flexibility with the dice, because the pips dictate which buildings you can build, but you can use officials in order to go minus up 1 pip. You can combine the benefits of different buildings so that they can give you synergy and stuff like that. So this is really, really nice. The production is gorgeous. This comes in a very small box, but it's fully packed with components and material. Lots of replayability, lots of different cards and different scenarios, and brilliant production overall. I really enjoyed how the game looks on the table, how easy it was for me to teach the game to other players and have a go with a couple of rules and just a ready, set, go. And the possibility of the different choices, the different pathways. I was already thinking in my last session what I would try to do different with this set of specific cards in a future game. Not to mention that if you bring all the rest of the cards that you're not going to see, because it's a ton of cards in the main box, in the core box, this gives endless possibilities and endless different gaming experience depending on which cards you choose. So, very nice impressions overall. I really enjoyed, I highly recommend it. It's a very simple yet strategic, with a lot of depth kind of game that will bring a lot of value to your table. If you like mechanisms like worker placement, interaction between players, but you can pull this down a notch if you decide to not use maybe some attacking cards, or depending on different scenarios. Nonetheless, this is a really, really fun game. We had a blast playing it and we really enjoyed it. We can really wait for the next time we try it with different sets of cards, different scenarios, so that we can try different techniques, pathways, and see if that works. Great game, check it out. This is Shaolia Warring States.